and welcome to the Mayor's Corner, a program that explores a variety of issues affecting residents and businesses in Wilmington. Now, here's Wilmington Mayor Mike Purzycki and Special Assistant to the Mayor, Ashley Christopher.
Thank you, Shakara. I'm Ashley Christopher, and today we are here to discuss all things Wilmington with Mayor Mike Purzycki. Mayor Mike, how are you today?
I'm well, Ashley. Thanks for being here.
I look forward to this conversation. And we're going to jump right into it. So first, I want to ask you, you speak very often of your desire for Wilmington to be a just city. Can you say what that looks like?
Yeah, early on, I kept trying to think of what is the narrative for our administration and the city itself. What's our story? What do we want to be? Do we want to be a corporate capital, the chemical capital, all those things that we were historically? And I reasoned very early on that the city's deficits were in our poor neighborhoods. Our deficits were in some of our schools and our community centers. And it impacted a large population in our city that I said has been marginalized for far too long. And what it suggests is that the city doesn't have it doesn't have its own sense of justice. Mm-hmm. And so a woman named Toni Griffin, a Harvard PhD, has something called the Just City Lab. She came to visit us and she showed me what she was doing. And I just thought, this is such a marvelous model for us to follow. Let this be our narrative. A just city where the doors of prosperity are open to everyone, mm-hmm. where the kids on this side of town get facilities as every bit as good as the other side of town, mm-hmm. where the neighborhoods over here are as clean as anywhere else's, that there are facilities for our children that are second to none. So it's a sense of balancing out the physical disparities, but it's also a sense that we have moral obligations to each other that transcend just those physical endeavors. So, Just City is almost what you expect it to be. It's a sense of kinship and brotherhood that we have for one another.
Okay. And would you say that so far, over the last almost 4 years in your administration, you've accomplished somewhat of that goal?
Just somewhat, because as everybody knows, we have so far to go. It's a long distance. But what we saw early on was, for example, that our Hicks Anderson Community Center was in terrible disrepair. Mm-hmm. To me, that sends a subliminal message to our children. They don't matter as much. That Eden Park, what once a very, very important regional park for the city, was in terrible condition. The football field was a mud hole. Mm-hmm. The pool had to be closed because of the way it was designed. The health department wouldn't let them operate. The picnic area was just a bunch of tables sitting around a ramshackle place. So we did those two facilities from top to bottom. We also instituted a clean city program where we go into our neighborhoods and we take six of our poorest neighborhoods and we send people out every single morning to clean them, handpick them, and we use people who live in those neighborhoods so they have an income. And it starts to penetrate that what becomes obvious is that we care about all neighborhoods, that we care about the folks who live in those neighborhoods. So we're working on that. We're working on employment endeavors. We are building up some of our neighborhoods. We're getting facade improvement grants for people. So, for literally just asking, you can get $5,000 to fix up the facade of your house. We have loan improvement programs for folks too. So it's a long journey and we're a long way from home, but we're going to get there because we're really intent on doing this.
And I think a lot of people can appreciate in our neighborhoods the fact that you handpick people from the specific neighborhoods to clean them. It's not like you're calling on people that live outside of these areas to come in and clean up on their behalf. And I think that is very important and significant because it gives a sense of community and it encourages people in their own, backyards. Hey, maybe I should be, aligning with my neighbor and helping them to clean up as well. So I think that's very important that you made an effort to make sure that you handpicked people in those neighborhoods.
We tried. It was a very important part of this. People have a lot of pride. They don't need somebody from the outside coming in and doing their work for them. It means a lot when you see neighbors, even guys coming out, some folks coming out, guys and women too, who are incarcerated. They come out and they have nothing, and all of a sudden they're making $13 an hour for cleaning neighborhoods. And we have some teams that that pick up so much their machines. I mean, they are so into it because it's their neighborhood, and so it's been a very successful program, which we are expanding this year. In spite of COVID, in spite of the economy, we doubled the funds allocated to cleaning our neighborhoods.
Yeah, that's awesome. And as mayor, you have so many different departments to run, so many different things to it, and so many people to meet with on a daily basis. What are the most important qualities you would say it takes to be the mayor of Wilmington?
Yeah, well, first of all, you're not applying for a job, you're applying for a life. So when you're awake, you're mayoring. And that means that I get calls in the middle of the night about a shooting, regrettably. All day long, we have things that pop up that just stretch your imagination. You can't imagine what kind of problems arise that land on the mayor's desk. I also think, look, people have problems, and you better have empathy. You better try to put yourself in the shoes of others, because they have problems, and they're basic problems. So if you live next to somebody who's got a barking dog that just won't go to sleep, that's a problem.
Yeah.
And it's as big a problem as anything you can imagine. If you can't sleep, if your life is miserable and you own this house, it's your biggest investment, you call the mayor's office. And we get this all the time. People who keep trash out and don't take care of their place. People who have pests in their place. Don't forget, we have so many row houses and townhouses. So if somebody doesn't take care of one door, and right next door has to endure the problems. So we do those things. We have, I've got 6 different local unions to deal with. They all have their own issues. We've got to try to coordinate them. It's kind of crazy things, but we'll have an issue of residency. And the way it's set up now, you have to negotiate residency with 6 different unions, and so you can't have 6 different rules, and you try to convince them, but they still say, no, that's something we have to negotiate. So you go back and do these things all day long. I don't think anybody who hasn't sat in the desk can even begin to tell you what it's like. I've kidded with former Mayor Williams and Jim Baker about how difficult it is, and they tell you nobody knows until you're there. It's funny too, because Michael Nutter, who was a former mayor of Philadelphia, came down to speak to a group, and he stood up in front of the group and he said to everybody, I want you to give your mayor a hand, because I can tell you right now, he has a tough job, because being a mayor is a tough job. Of course, he's a mayor of Philadelphia, but still, he had a full appreciation for how difficult it is to be the mayor of a city.
Oh, yeah. And I can say from my vantage point that you've devoted yourself as mayor of a majority Black city to listen, to be a student, and to understand the plight of your constituent base. What would you say is the biggest misconception about you?
I guess the biggest misconception, without doing a psychoanalysis, which is pretty hard, I think the biggest misconception is best reflected in something that happened to me when I was campaigning. And I stood up in front of everybody. It was over at the PAL on North Market. And I told them all my views about everything. And a woman stood up to me, an African-American woman, and she said, Mayor, what do you know about my life? And I said to her, more than you know, but I take your point. It's very hard for people to look at me and say, he can relate to me. I'm hopeful that people who have interacted with me over the years would disabuse somebody of that notion, that in fact, I'm probably more empathetic in the real world than most people are. That is, that I don't want to just tell you how sorry I feel for you. I want to understand what your problem is and figure out a way to solve it, and that's what we've tried to do. So I think that's a misconception, and I hope it's one that over time is eroding.
And I can say from my personal experience, meeting you, you're a very well put together man. You come from a very significant background, working down at the RDC, and you have been nothing but an open ear to listen. You take the problems of your constituent base very seriously, and you are a man of action. So I can say that confidently from somebody that has been closely connected to you over the last few years.
Well, let me just follow up on that, if you will.
Yeah.
So I would say to you that when I said to that woman, more than you know, but I take your point, a whole lot less then than I know today. Because working with you and Tanny Washington and my whole staff of mostly African Americans on my staff, it was me and 7 African American women working together for the longest time, and now we have 6 African American women and a South Korean woman, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, but I learn so much. I can't tell you how many times I have been chastened by my staff to say, you're wrong about that. And I'm smart enough to understand today that perception is really important. And I think what I've understood more than anything, and I've written about this, as you know, is that Black America and white America see history through different lenses. So an argument about who's right and who's wrong is really hard because they've got a different lens through which they see those same facts. So it's kind of like arguing about religion. You know, everybody's got they've got their own personal view about it, and it's hard to convince somebody, here, why don't you change religions? I'll show you how smart I am, you know? So, yeah. But what's wondrous about the difficulties of today is you're finding that people who have never considered the possibility that there's another view they're sure that there's another view. You still have to work to see it, but at least they said, I guess I've been wrong all this time. You know, stuck on my own view of the world. That's been a terrible mistake. Now I've got to try to figure out how I understand how other people feel. Yeah. And I think you're starting to see an awakening, which I think is going to make America a much better place when it's all said and done.
I agree. And that's the perfect segue into the next question. So the Black Lives Matter movement, arguably one of the largest civil rights movements of all time. As mayor of a majority Black city, what is your specific message to your Black constituent base?
My specific message, I think that if I had a message, obviously I want to tell them, but not like every white guy who says, I don't see race, you know. I mean, we're well past that. I want them to understand how much I and my administration are committed to the proposition that there's dignity in every human being. And that I think for someone who's not experienced it, I think I'm as well versed as anybody out there. I've never read anybody who writes about it that I feel as though I am somehow informationally inferior to them, because I think as you well know, I've studied the issue of race from pre-slavery right up today with as much academic interest as anybody. I read it and I live it, and I think I just have unique personal experiences that prepare me for this. And I don't want to make a big deal of this, but including having a Black child.
Do you find yourself having to have difficult conversations that you wouldn't have had with your father growing up, because you have a son that's experiencing one of the largest civil rights movements of all time as a high school aged kid?
Yeah, I mean, we talk about it. I'm lucky in a way. He is, well, we're all lucky. We're blessed to have him in our lives. And I think he's been blessed with the opportunities that he's had. And I think he is somebody who's not been scarred by his life. I don't know that we have had very difficult conversations, but we have them. We have them, and we're gratified that he seems to be adjusting pretty well. He's not an angry young man. He's a happy young person. He's productive, and I think. But I'm well aware that he still faces the same problems that all kids do. African American kids, Black kids.
Of course.
Yep.
So what would you say over the last 4 years, what accomplishments as mayor are you most proud of?
Well, probably the single most significant thing that we've accomplished in 3.5 years, you and Earl Cooper are responsible for. Early on, you came to me and you said, we want to do something for young people in this city, and we want to, as graduates of an HBCU ourselves, you're a double HBCU grad, we want young people to know just what is available in the HBCU experience. And so you said, we want to do a college fair. And so right away I said, yes, let's do it. And that first year, I think you had 700 kids show up, which I thought was mind-blowing, that you could get 700 kids coming to this school to just open their eyes to the HBCU experience. You had 300 kids admitted. I'm doing this by memory, you can correct me. And you had $1 million or so in scholarships, which you thought was fantastic. The year later, you said, Mayor, we want to do a week. And I said, oh my God, do we really have to do a week? And you convinced me to do a week. So not only did we move to the Chase Center and do another one, we doubled the number of people, just over doubled the number of people came. You got half again of them who got admitted on the spot, and scholarships money went up again. But then you added Battle of the Bands, where we had 7,000 people show up at Frawley Stadium and have the best time I've ever seen anybody happen ever, right? And then this year, of course, we got Stephen A. Smith to come to town and Magic Johnson, and we had it down at the 76ers field house, and an astonishing 3,500 kids came in there to interview for admission to schools. And you can remind me how many got in, but 2,200 or whatever it was. Fantastic number of kids got admitted. $4 million of scholarships were given. And so what we have here is a national model for introducing our children to historically Black colleges and universities. And I said it at the banquet we had this year, that there's nothing I do that makes me feel better as a human being. In fact, I'll be thrilled if everybody forgets about the riverfront and just says he was involved with getting the HBCU week done, because that's how wonderful a program it is. As I said, we had Stephen A. Smith come here to Wilmington, Delaware. We had 300 people at a black tie event. He came down here and said, here's a place where, let's see, governors, senators, and the mayor are here to honor the kids who most of the time are forgotten. And he said, I want to bring First Take here. So they brought them all down to the field house, and we had that marvelous event, and they all want to sign up and do it again. So in a sense, that has helped brand what Wilmington is. I mean, when you walk out and around the country and say, tell me about your city, I'll say, how about this one for starters, where we've got all of our kids online to get in the historically Black colleges and universities. And when I see the way the kids who've been away to school come back and say, let me tell you what this has done for my life, it's pretty amazing. In fact, you said when you advertised it earlier, the week that changes lives. Yeah, and it is.
Yeah.
And it changed my life.
Yeah, and funny enough, when I thought about it, before I came to you back in 2017 to say, hey, this is something I want to do, in my mind, because this was early on, I had met you maybe a month before I came on board in January. And I'm like, how am I going to convince the mayor to let me put on the blackest event the city has probably ever seen? And, funny enough, you were the biggest cheerleader. You supported it with your finances, with connections, and you helped us to build this really significant event. And the social impact behind it has been incredible. You've talked about how you have, rebuilt these infrastructures for community centers for kids in the city of Wilmington. I know you're going to get into what you've done for the parks. And now we're getting thousands of kids into school every year to go to a Black college or university. And I think that it's very significant that we highlight and have a laser focus on your commitment to the youth in the city of Wilmington. Because you have shown that it is something that is important. The kids are our future, and you've wrapped your arms around it, and it's something that we can't ignore. So thank you for your support of HBCU Week, and I'm sure that your constituent base that's watching agrees, because it's been an incredible endeavor.
Yeah,
Thank you.
It's been wonderful.
Yeah. So for the 2020 mayoral election, you were uncontested for quite some time, and then suddenly you had two other people jump in the race. When people ask me, why should I support the mayor? Can you tell me, who should I vote for? Why should I support Mayor Mike? My response is always, why not? I mean, we've done so much. Look around the city. But I ask you, what is your message to people who are questioning whether or not they should support you in this upcoming election?
I think my answer is probably pretty much the way it was in 2016 when I ran. Everybody tells you what they're going to do. So when they tell you what they're going to do, ask them what they've done. And I just like to think that if you look at what's happened in 3.5 years in the city of Wilmington, where all of our physical plants have been improved dramatically. I mean, anybody who hasn't been to Hicks Anderson's got to go there just to see how beautiful it is, and to see how beautiful Eden Park is and what that means to kids. I have to tell you, if you walk in the lobby of the City County building, it's been totally transformed. And by the way, you know what the display is as you walk in there. We got 40 images of notable African Americans on that wall with a big sign that says Black history is American history, which has been part of a speech I gave one day to say, you know, people stop talking about Black history like it's something different. It is the essence of American history. And so, you know, those are things I'm very proud of. We're doing Rodney Square all over again. So there was a big fuss and fume about Rodney Square back a while ago. We are losing all the employers in our downtown because Rodney Square and other places were so degraded. We had so many buses on Rodney Square that the trees died. All the trees around the square died. So we had DelDOT build this beautiful transit center down by the train station. We have a quarter of the number of buses on Rodney Square today. We just spent $4 million by the time it was all said with the state and DelDOT and everybody else. It's going to be a beautiful center square with a fountain that's going to be for kids. I mean, it gets to be an interactive fountain that we want people to come back to the square, but be in a healthy environment. I think that sometimes everybody talks about stuff, but getting to do it takes execution. It takes a certain kind of personality. It takes a certain kind of impatience with the people who work for you. I always say you can't win without good players, and so we've put good players in all of our directors' positions. And I would tell you, what I would hope they would say, he's fair, but he's really demanding, because if you're not, these things don't get finished. So if you take a look around the city, just look today at all of the roads that are being paved. This city is going to be the best paved road in all of America. With COVID, very few cars on the road. We work with DelDOT, and we've got construction going all over our city. The city's looking great. We have apartments being built all over the city, over 1,000 units being built. We got purpose built up in the Northeast, the flats over on the west side. You know, we've got so many good things going on, and I just look forward to being in the campaign and telling everybody, if you want to trade me in doing all these things, that's your choice. But I think I'd like you to think about keeping me around for 4 years.
Yeah, I would agree. And I have one last question for you. One of my favorite authors of all time, Zora Neale Hurston, most famously said, "All my skinfolk ain't my kinfolk." And what she meant by that was you can easily inhabit a Black body, but still be an agent of white supremacy. And today, it's very critical for Black America to know who is for them. There are elections coming up all over the country. So who is for them regardless of skin color? So what would you say that you've done specifically to demonstrate that you're an ally of the Black community? I have a few examples that I could discuss, but I'd like for you to tell the people from your own words and your perspective what you've demonstrated.
Here is what I hope people realize, that everything that we have done to foster growth and support, especially to our young kids, but not only, was done long before George Floyd. So you heard me speak to one of the biggest law firms in the city, and that was a rough talk. It was a rough talk because I don't know that it was a hostile audience, it was an uncomfortable audience. But I told them, we cannot have a good city unless it's a good city for everybody. And you remember what I read, the poem of that 15-year-old who basically it was so disheartening because in her poetry, she was revealing where she thought she fit in society, which was not a good place. And I read it to them. And I remember when one guy got up all angry about it because he thought I made the talk too political. Well, it deserved to be political. I spoke to a group of business people, a committee of 100, and I just sat there and said, let me tell you, here are the facts about our schools. Don't tell me how great our schools are. Here are problems we have, and it's your fault. And it's your fault because you guys live in Pennsylvania, you like to go to charter schools. Your kids that go to charter schools, you're not worried about the public schools, but the public schools have problems. And it was very uncomfortable. And I've done that now for how long? And the article I wrote in the News Journal just a couple of weeks ago about America has to atone for sins, I had written that a year ago. I just updated it. But I didn't publish it because I never felt there was the time to do it. And when all these things happened, I said, let me just press send and publish it. So I want everybody to know that long before George Floyd, long before these terrible killings, I was out speaking about this and talking about it. And the only thing I can't do is change what I look like. I mean, that's still a problem, but hopefully someday I'll get over it. Or everybody else will get over it.
Yeah, everyone else will. Well, Mayor, thank you so much for this conversation. I hope that it was enlightening for everyone that's tuning in. I know you very well, so none of your words have surprised me. But I've had the opportunity to get to know you over about 4 years, and my goal is to make sure that everyone that looks like me can feel as comfortable as I do with you running this city. Because you've done a fantastic job, and I can't imagine anything different over the next 4 years. So thank you, Mayor, and thanks for joining us on the Mayor's Corner. More amazing conversation to come with our Mayor, Mike Purzycki. I'm Ashley Christopher. See you next time.